With over 30 years in the creative and advertising industries, it's Ross McCrae here. He's a seasoned entrepreneur and he's an innovator in business development. And in the 1990s, he launched a successful web development consultancy before he founded BikiniList, which became Europe's leading directory for creative talent, reps, and production companies for over 2 decades. He's also got AgencySource, launched in 2020, which is a lead generation platform built specifically for agencies, brands, and production companies. So we're here to find out about how Ross helps creative teams build relationships and how they can win new business, especially in these uncertain markets. So, Mr. Ross, glad to see you. Glad to be speaking with you.
Yeah, nice to be here. Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. And to help us understand about like why we're here and the value that we're providing, who are we talking to? Who out there is really stuck or struggling, and how do you help?
So I think everyone's really stuck and struggling. It doesn't really matter which industry in, but specifically, I suppose we're talking about the creative industry, production, advertising, and the reps that rep talent in that industry. I think they are struggling because there's not much being green lit, if that makes sense, these days. And there is definitely a downturn, definitely a slowdown in that industry. We notice it, and we are quite often a very early bellwether for what's going on in the industry, because if we find that there's loads of changes in the industry, which we track, then obviously that means that people are being laid off perhaps, or businesses are downsizing, and we've seen a lot of that. So we know that that is happening.
Okay. And yeah, so then you wonder, okay, well, what can we do about that, right? It's easy to give up and say, okay, I'll change careers, I'll shut down my company, but what's the fun in that, right? We want to adapt to the times.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things I say to my team and anybody else who will listen is the only constant in this industry is change, right? And that's not new. That's been going on for a long time. So if change is a constant part of what we do, then we need to accept that when things change outside our control, we can use the opportunities that presents, because change isn't all bad, right? So for example, if things are slower, projects coming in are not coming in as quickly as they could, that may free up time within the organization, within your business, to do some things that you should have done when you were busy, and optimize that time that you've got, your bigger bandwidth almost, to invest in what will become the next wave of growth for you. In other words, take the opportunity to start building connections with new people, redevelop relationships with old clients, and even people who may have moved from your business and are now working client side or even in competitive companies. Utilize all these networking abilities you've got and all this your professional network to reach out and fill your pipeline for when things change, which they will, and we hope for the best.
Yes, I like it. Turn that change into an opportunity and consider those people in your orbit, or who should be in your orbit, or who maybe fell out of your orbit, and get them back, right? You talked about there's the present and there's the past, and the people that maybe fell off. And it's when you talk about it in this way, it's so important, but it's also kind of abstract. And there's also that delayed gratification, right? You reconnect with people, you build these relationships that will pay off later, and some and most won't even pay off, right? Because if you're looking for that 100% optimization, then you're really an opportunist. And so it's kind of hard to get one's head wrapped around it, right? Because you say, well, it's a big time commitment and a lot of like energy and memory to remember people and to reach out. So have you ever experienced any pushback if someone says, oh yeah, I've heard I need to network and I need to make the phone calls, but I'm so busy, and now with things changing, I really can't find the time. So what would you say to that? Because it is quite a mindset to get ourselves into. So how do we think the way you do?
So what most people should be saying in challenging times when there's maybe a downturn is, I wish I'd done more of that network and outreach when I was busy before this quiet period came along. Whether it was the industry that caused the quiet period, you yourself that's caused the quiet period, or the economic situation that's caused the quiet period, you all realize that you should have been doing this as you were going along anyway. And you should make time in your diary to do that so that you don't have the peaks and troughs and the feast and famine of these cyclical projects, right? And once you realize that, then it becomes almost, can you afford not to commit the time to doing that networking? Because it will stand you in good stead 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years down the line. If you don't do it, it's not going to happen. And it's too late in the quiet period. You should have been doing it 6 months ago. So you've got to make time in your time. It's a bit like when you went to college, okay, or school. You were doing more than one subject. You had a timetable to make sure you applied yourself to the required amount of time for each subject so that you didn't neglect one. You've got to do the same for your business. You've got to give yourself a default diary, a timetable that allows you time in your week, every week, to do networking and pipeline. You must. Even if you're frantic busy, you just have to find time to do it. Because there'll come a time when you're not frantic busy and you wish you had. So do it now before you wish you had.
Yes, even if you're busy, it's not an excuse. Find the time, apply
No.
that long-term strategy. And I love the school example because when you think about in any kind of school, right? When you're a young adult and you're a teenager, it's still, there's a lot of those similarities where you're juggling multiple subjects and you have to always be like studying and like slowly making progress. And if you said, hey, I've got this chemistry class and I won't go to any class, I won't read any book, and then the morning of the test, that's when I'll first open the book and I'll just read the whole thing. It will never work, right? But if you kind of do it in small chunks, if you have a long-term scheduled time management strategy, then and many people have completed many kinds of education just by having the right approach. And so help us understand about the kinds of people and companies that you help. Who's your ideal person? Who has benefited from knowing you?
From knowing us, knowing me, and knowing my businesses.
Yeah, knowing your businesses, or just like, who have you helped?
So we would help TV production companies, ad agencies, production reps, photographers reps, all the people that work in the media stroke creative industry. And also because we've applied some of the things that we encourage our members or clients to do to our own business, we've also helped ourselves by applying some of this stuff, So we wouldn't do anything. We wouldn't suggest that people do things that we wouldn't do ourselves. And the kind of people we help typically will be, in some cases, one-man bands, but 1 to 10 employee businesses where the principals are wearing lots of hats, and that's the kind of people that we like to help. Equally, we have larger corporations that use our services where they're looking for, to speed up the efficiency of their new business outbound outreach, and then we can help them as well.
Very cool. And it's when you talk about company size, it's so bizarre now, right? Because sometimes there's what used to require 20 people is now 4 people, and then there's AI and a lot of like automation use, which is like a scary subject, right? It seems like AI has gotten into everything you think about with like film and television. AI has replaced a lot of writers, or they say like, oh, we only need like 2 writers now. Or with photography, someone makes some like beautiful photo, and then first thing someone says is, oh, did AI generate this? And so what have you seen as far as this AI revolution and it kind of like messing up people's livelihoods or upending these industries? Just like, what have you seen and what do you think is happening?
So obviously that I've seen that has happened. So people have been upended. People have had their livelihoods messed with. Okay, so it's still early days. Okay, and particularly in the creative sector, there's a lot of fear. Okay, so in production, there's a lot of fear. My own take on it is that just as in, the 80s, there was a fear that all the creatives in the world would be replaced by Apple Macs, right? In the 80s. That didn't happen, although computers in production and creativity are obviously very much part of the industry. What happened was the jobs changed. So there wasn't necessarily less jobs and opportunities. In fact, you could argue there's probably more jobs and opportunities now because of technology, right? But the actual day-to-day activities have changed. That doesn't mean they're any less creative. It just means that the industry will have different types of functions and activities to perform. Okay. So I would embrace all that you can, with the proviso that we don't really know where it's going yet. That's what I would say.
And it's an interesting paradox, isn't it? You say from an individual level, well, my job's going away, and so I need to figure out these new skills. But in the bigger picture, there are more jobs than ever to be had, but you can't get those jobs if you stay complacent and you don't develop yourself. And so it's always interesting. Yeah. And so it's always great to hear just about how someone like you has transformed personally and business wise and in thinking. So like, what have the past 5 or 10 years been like for you? Like, where have you really struggled? What have you had to do to step up through all these changes?
Okay, so the biggest change has been technology, and that, if you like, has meant the growth of obviously the web. I mean, I've been around for 30 years, so I started my business right at the start, in the 90s. We've constantly changed. We're constantly adding new features. I'm just trying to think of the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge would be to not only stay ahead of technology in terms of the way that we work, but also to reflect what we offer in the way that the industry changes. So it's not just about our own internal workflow changing, but the way that ad agencies do business, the way that production companies do business, the way that reps work changes year on year. And the biggest change, of course, was the pandemic. That really changed things up and gave a lot of change during that period. So we've always been listening to what our prospective customers and our existing customers say to us, to try and find out how can we help them in this new way of doing business. And I think that would be the most, that's the thing that we've done the most, to try and keep up to date with the way people work and the way companies work these days.
Is there anything in particular that these customers have been saying? You say that it's important to listen to what they're saying. Are there any trends? Or do you keep hearing like the same thing repeatedly?
Right. So in terms of the advertising production world, which I can talk about, there are so many more people working in production who now want to work without going through an agency, straight to a brand. Okay. And that's been around for the last 10 years. There's been that requirement. There are also so many more people who used to be in an advertising agency now working brand size, which is, again, in the last 10 years, the biggest change of this industry. So much so that our database, which would always be heavily weighted towards advertising, is now heavily weighted towards the clients, the CMOs and people like that, because that's where the work is being done more and more. Which sounds as if I'm saying that advertising is finished. Of course it isn't. It's just, again, things are moving. The point of production is moving from one part of the food chain to the other. And just being aware of all of that, particularly with technology in terms of smartphones and production being done for not just TV commercials, for example, but also being done for online content, you find that maybe people who used to go to a traditional advertising agency to get something produced now don't. They go to an individual content creator who can do it all in one room on one phone. And that's a change that we've tried to reflect. I don't know if that's too industry specific or that was what you were asking me, but that's the biggest change we've seen.
Well, it's good to be industry specific, right? Because we can say, hey, here's how it's done here. And then we can always abstract it to something else. And I think Wayne Gretzky calls that going to where the hockey puck will be headed, right? If you're hanging on to some kind of dying industry and saying, hey, where are my clients going? Where are the customers? Versus someone like you saying, well, hey, let's have that deeper understanding what is their thought process? Where are they going now instead of where they are going? And how do we adapt and adjust to that? And so how does this relate to BikiniList and AgencySource? What's the solution being provided in these two companies?
So AgencySource is a database of 100,000 contacts globally that commission creative production work. Okay. And we check that database to make sure it's up to date. And what that gives our subscribers, if you like, is the ability to, in terms of new business, in terms of who are their dream clients, who do they want to reach out to, who do they want to work with in the next 5 years, who do they want to start building relationships with. We have done, if you like, the hard yards at the beginning to identify those people, both in terms of pre-qualifying them, so getting good contact information for them, pre-qualifying them that they're in the right industry and that they do the right kind of work for our prospective and existing customers, which of course is what a lot of new business people will spend hours and hours and hours and hours on LinkedIn and trawling the web doing. We've already done that. So that's what I always think is our USP. We can present you up with warm leads that are not cold. They're coldish to you, but at least they're pre-qualified. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. You find the right people and they're pre-vetted. You're not just getting someone off of LinkedIn. That it's really important. And so as we kind of jumped around and talked about all these interesting things about you and your business, right? About how important it is to build these relationships, to talk to people, to take work seriously, to see these industry trends. But I've only just met you and I've only just discovered about AgencySource and BikiniList. So in this conversation we're having here, Mr. Ross McCrae, is there a missing hidden question that I should be asking you, I just don't know to ask you?
What is the most important thing that business development teams can do in times of crisis? Maybe I don't know how to answer that, but I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
So I think the opportunity is there to pipeline. So maybe if you haven't done enough pipelining, that's what you should be thinking. So go to networking events for face-to-face networking, right? Use professional networking platforms like LinkedIn to start reaching out to people that you want to connect with and maybe turn them into clients in the next month or so, right? Cold-ish email outreach. I say cold-ish, in other words, don't just blast out to people trying to get as many people to see your product and your services as possible. In other words, get pre-qualified leads and an email address for them and do a very, very targeted, meaningful, relevant email campaign to them, right? Reconnect with previous clients, and then, as I said before, find out where your ex-employees are. You might find that somebody you work with, either in your own business or in a business that you're at before you started your own business, is now client side. So leverage that relationship and see if you can reach out to them. Find out if they've got the same challenges and pain points in challenging times as you do. That's probably what I would say.
Very nice. And so it's so important to pursue this, right? And I like the way that you explained it is it's like, well, what's your sequence? How do you warm someone up? It won't happen overnight, but you have to start somewhere. So find these coldish leads, talk to them, have these conversations, follow up, reconnect, and then figure out how you can get it turned into something. And so as far as someone specifically using agencysource.tv, what are the steps there? If that's a lead gen platform that helps agencies in difficult times. So if some agency out there says, okay, well, we are a lot of what Ross said makes sense, and we need to go and find these hot or these coldest leads, turn them into hot leads, see what can be done. Like, what are the steps? How does someone sign up with AgencySource, and how do you recommend they use your platform?
Okay, so go to agencysource.tv, register for a demo, and we'll talk to you and do a demo. We wouldn't want you to sign up for something that wasn't going to work for you. But let's say you decided to sign up. Great. So then what you have to do is to think, very strategically about who are your dream clients and how are you going to approach them. So we hopefully will have that information there for you already. In other words, the clients that you want are already there. If not, we can do what we call bespoke research and get the information that we don't have if you need that. Then you, what I call silo your prospects. So the people that you really want to work with, this 10 or 20 companies that are your dream clients, you use the platform to network with them, connect with them on LinkedIn. We've got LinkedIn URLs built into the platform so you can reach out to LinkedIn straight away. Build up a network of the people that are your dream clients. Don't send them a mass email. That isn't going to work. So start personally marketing to them either by email or LinkedIn messaging, and by telephone call if that's something you want to do. Find out who you've got in common. Find out if you can get any introductions to these people, and treat that silo of 10 or 20 real dream clients as the gold standard. These are the people you're going to put on a pedestal and introduce yourself to them, and do it very respectfully. Put them on a pedestal and ask them if they wouldn't mind giving you feedback on what you do, right? And the platform is tailor-made for that, right? Then there's a second tier that I think of as people that you can reach out to, maybe in a campaign to an email marketing campaign, for example, to maybe 200 or 300 people. This is very targeted, and on AgencySource you can say, I want to get all the CMOs in the US who work at automotive companies, and you can download a list of those, and you can create a very targeted, relevant message on the platform, connect the list to the message, and send it out from the platform, or equally send it out through your own marketing channels, whether that's an email platform or whatever. And they think of that as like getting them to visit a website landing page that you've created just for that group. So if you've got work in that area, make sure they see that when they land, either on the website landing page or on the website itself, or even better, include an example in the template when you send the work to them, and say, love to get your feedback on some work we did for a similar company to you. Okay, so your approach is not hard sell. It's all about getting feedback. It's all about putting them on a pedestal. And as you say, you might not work with them ever. You might not hear back from them for a year, 6 months, 3 months, two weeks, whatever it is. But not doing it means you'll never hear from them. Doing it means you might. Right? So very important. And then finally, there's a third tier, which is people who are in the right market for your services, and they are not in your top tier or second tier, and you can do a more general email marketing campaign or LinkedIn campaign to them. And that way you're addressing each different strata at some point, if that makes sense, and do it regularly. And our platform makes that really easy.
Yes, it's important. I love your approach, and it's a great strategy, especially if someone is neglecting the relationship building, not taking it seriously, doing it intermittently, or maybe if they've tried it, but they didn't do it in this intentional, deliberate way that you're describing, and they just kind of they winged it, right? They just kind of made it up as they went along, and they got similar results versus what you're suggesting, which I really like. Like you say, okay, you start with those 10 or 20 leads and you really work on them, right? You don't just spam them. You figure out, you say, hey, can I get feedback on what I've done for a similar company as yours? And you have these conversations. And then when you get that dialed in, you make that landing page for that specific group of person at that specific group of company, and you work on your 200 or so. And so that way you scale and you get results, but you're also putting in the time. So you're not just spamming, you're not just blasting. It's a great way to open up some doors, to start some conversations, and to talk to these people that you can and should be speaking to. And that website is agencysource.tv. They are the new business platform for agencies, production, and reps. It's for new agency business. You connect with CMOs and brand managers at dream clients. And you can go to agencysource.tv and just find all about them. They've been helping advertising agencies, production companies, and reps find new clients internationally for 20 years. They have live contact details for over 50,000 chief marketing officers, brand managers, TV producers, art directors, creative directors, and marketers at ad agencies and direct brands. So if a lot of what Ross was telling us today made sense, but you say, okay, well, it sounds good in theory and principle wise, like I know I need a network, how do I do it? Well, the next step is to go to agencysource.tv. There's buttons there where you can book a free demo or you can try it now.